It is the biggest case out of southern Indiana right now, and this week a guilty plea from the man at the center of it all, former Clark County Sheriff Jamey Noel. Thanks for joining us. I'm Brooke Hash with our Focus reporter Travis Breeze, who's been on this story since day one, and it seems like we may be nearing a close to this.
It does. On August 23rd, Jamey Noel entered that he wanted to change his plea, and then on August 26th, he formally pleaded guilty to 27 of the 31 felonies that he's charged with. And if you're unfamiliar with who Jamey Noel is, he was the Clark County Sheriff in southern Indiana for 8 years. He left office at the end of 2022. And he's been charged with stealing from the sheriff's office and also stealing from his fire and EMS departments that he ran for, I think we're saying about 15 years, maybe 15 to 20 years. These departments existed in some capacity before him, but he really took over them and really ramped them up. So he's accused of stealing, I should say, a little over $4 million when it's all accounted for. And we had been hearing, not guilty. His attorneys had been, very tight-lipped, not saying much. Until the end of August, when his team must have decided that the amount of evidence that the state had stacked up with 70 search warrants so far in this case. The investigation started in June of 2023, and they've been continuing to file search warrants all the way through this summer. So it was over a year of investigation. So they must have just felt that it was the best thing for him to plead guilty.
And this happened on Monday when he officially walked into that courtroom, appeared before Judge Larry Medlock, who's been a big part of this case too, and made that plea agreement. Though nothing is set in stone because Medlock still has to give his signature to this. Yeah,
that's exactly right. Judge Medlock, he listened to Jamey Noel and his attorney. It took about 20 minutes for them to read through all the charges and for Jamey to say, yes, I did, over and over again. And at the end of it, Judge Medlock just kind of sat there quietly and said, I'm not going to accept this today, which I've learned is common for judges to not accept a plea deal, the day that it's entered. But he wants some time to think about it, and he wants real people, residents of Clark County, people who worked for these fire departments. He wants those real people to weigh in before he agrees to this plea deal. And you can see, I guess we haven't mentioned the details of the plea agreement yet at this time, but it's a 15-year prison sentence with 3 years of probation afterwards, and he would have to pay back more than $3 million total in restitution, with the majority of that, $2.8 million, going to his fire and EMS departments. So it's not the full amount of the money that the state police have alleged, but it's close. And the current people in charge of his fire departments made that clear to me. They said, we wish it would have been the full amount, because it's not quite, but it is close.
Because they're struggling with all of this too. And Noel has been in jail all these months, dating back how long?
April 9th.
April 9th.
Was when he was sentenced to 60 days in for contempt of court. A play on words from the 60 Days In A&E show that he did. And then on June 4th, Judge Larry Medlock set his new bond at $1.5 million. And Jamey was being arraigned on 6 new charges. And Judge Medlock made sure to let the courtroom know that he was taking all the evidence that had come out between those months of November to June, taking all that evidence into account when he set this $1.5 million bond.
Stable of exotic motor vehicles, a harem of women, at least 3 mansions, at least $3,000 suits, $800 belts, which you get personally delivered. And still seem to think that the Utica Volunteer Fire Department's your personal piggy bank.
So that was the day that Jamey was brought back into court to be arraigned on 6 new charges. I don't think he or his team were expecting to get a $1.5 million bond for just these 6 charges when he was already facing 25 at that point. Right. And the state police had said that we have evidence, Judge, that he has spent $53,000 on these credit cards since we arrested him in November. And to Medlock, that really spoke volumes. He was like, you're continuing to do this after you've been arrested. And it was kind of a shock to all of us in the courtroom on that day. But the combination of a $1.5 million bond and his assets being frozen in this civil case has meant that he has not been able to get out of jail. So he's been in jail for 142 days at this point. And I think it said in the plea agreement he would get credit for time served after June 4th. Okay. But that would, only be, 70 days or so. The other thing that I think influenced the decision to plead guilty was what happened with his immediate family in the month of August. So on August 1st, his wife Misty filed for divorce. And she had been facing 15 felonies along with him. And, she had appeared behind him in court several times. It appeared that the family was going to stick this out. And then Misty filed for divorce on August 1st, and their daughter Casey, their oldest daughter, who's also facing 9 felonies, her attorney said that they're going to be bringing in an expert witness who's an expert in manipulation and potential, mental abuse.
Turning against her own dad.
Yeah, and they said that when Jamey had gone back to jail in April, they became clear-minded. They realized once we were away from him, we realized that he was controlling us. And so this is what Casey's attorney said recently in court.
Away from Jamey's physical presence and his physical control, a much clearer picture of the control and the manipulation and the relationship that he had with his immediate family has emerged.
So at this hearing that you're looking at right now, Misty and Casey asked to have their criminal cases joined because they kind of want to have a team effort in their defense. The judge has not ruled on that if they're going to be allowed to join their cases yet.
And it all has to deal with the amount of jurors, and we'll be talking about toward the end of this. But we also want to get to the impact that this case has had on all the fire and EMS services that Noel helped run. That's
completely true. And that's kind of how my focus shifted throughout 2024. I started on the court case, and then as all these elected officials and all these people who are in charge of EMS service in Clark and Floyd counties, they're watching the news and they're like, we gotta move on. It was a combination of, some baggage, people not wanting to be associated with New Chapel EMS. But the main thing that all these elected officials would tell you is that it had to do with staffing and response times. I think given the EMS shortage across the nation, Clark County had relaxed some of its, target response times a little bit, but New Chapel was still not meeting those target average goals. And there was some, one-off cases where it would take an ambulance 30 minutes to get to somewhere, and Clark County is really big. And they were contracted to only provide 6 ambulances. And so the response times got so bad that they lost 4 contracts this year, and a lot of it has to do with this family that you're about to hear from, people having similar experiences like they did.
She is 4 months today.
Natalia Weathers is a happy, healthy baby. But just 3 days into her life, her parents had a giant scare.
She started convulsing like possibly a seizure.
On March 20th, she started shaking, her lips turned blue, and she wouldn't respond. Her mom, Janie, called 911.
And with me being a first-time mom and her being so young, I kind of told her, I was like, I gave you all the information I have, just please send help.
Charlestown Police and Fire responded first, and then New Chapel EMS.
Eventually. Yes.
New Chapel arrived at their house 23 minutes after being dispatched. It felt like an eternity.
I just remember, waiting on them to show up, and I'm holding my daughter in my hands because I don't know what to do. I'm waiting for the ambulance to get here.
They stayed at Norton Children's Hospital for 5 days, and after tons of tests, doctors said it was just abnormal jerking in her sleep and nothing serious.
It felt very serious, especially the way she was convulsing.
And clearly these patients didn't feel like they got something out of this that they needed to make them feel completely cared for in that moment, and that's something we can learn from.
New Chapel EMS spokesperson S. Coy Travis says there were 6 other EMS runs in the county at this time, and they had to call in extra staff.
Our contract with Clark Clark County is for 6 trucks, so we went 1 truck beyond the contract to respond to that call.
Like Jamey, Clark County commissioners have had enough, making the first move Thursday to look for a new ambulance provider.
In my 42 years, I've never seen the EMS service at the level it's at right now.
The EMS board will speak to every agency that owns an ambulance in the county and report back with a possible coverage plan.
Support the existing plan that we have in place now, with the hopes that it gives us time to look towards and work towards that long-term solutions.
She loves unicorns.
Janie and Gregory are thankful Natalia is okay and that county leaders are taking action.
Especially like when I seen that we were not the only family waiting, you know, on them to come.
And with so many of these contracts now lost with Utica and New Chapel EMS, is there a replacement? Are people still getting the services they're paying for throughout the county?
Yes, for every single one of the contracts that they've lost, they have found an agency to replace them. So for their 2 fire contracts that they lost, the replacing agencies were Jeffersonville Fire Department, agreed to cover Utica Township, and for New Albany Township, a new department started called New Albany Township Fire Rescue. So they replaced the 2 fire contracts. And now in Floyd County, you have AmeriPro, and starting next year, it'll be Highlander Fire Department as well. And then in Clark County, Heartland Ambulance Service is taking over. Yeah, that's the biggest coverage area, the biggest probably contract that's going to be required is to do ambulance service in Clark County.
And we want to hold those accountable. You know, it's not so much that they've lost their contracts with New Chapel, but we do want to, at the same time, hold those accountable who've been in those positions, aside from Jamey Noel. And you talked to Matt Owen, who's been with the department for some time.
Yes, Matt Owen became the CEO of New Chapel EMS in February, and he had a long-standing relationship with Jamey Noel for years going back. They helped each other run for office and things like that. And Matt honestly feels like he did see some things that could have been red flags with Jamey Noel, but he said everybody just knew Jamey as this larger-than-life personality, always had lots of money, always had side jobs. And his feeling was kind of, you could blame me for being one person who didn't catch it, but there's tons of other people who you could blame as well. And I did a sit-down interview with Matt about the state of New Chapel and kind of what's happened. And he really kind of portrayed to me that they are the victim of his alleged crimes because they could have used that money to run a better department.
There's things that we should have had for this organization and our providers all along, like, you know, upgraded equipment, better ambulances to run in, nicer, you know, stretchers for patients to ride on, better protocols for our paramedics to work through. And we were always told, even the fire departments, more crews to fill fire trucks. And we were always told that can't be because we can't afford it. And that wasn't true. We were lied to for years.
And going back to what I was talking about a minute ago, the relationship between Matt and Jamey, it did go on for many years, and Matt said that he considered Jamey a mentor and a close friend. And I tried to get Matt to, you know, does he want to apologize for what's gone on? Does he want to apologize for how close he was to the situation? And this is what he had to say. Do you want to say, I'm sorry? Or do you feel like you don't have to apologize?
I don't know that I am sorry, because there should have been something that got this attention well before it devolved into what it is. And I'm somebody who was very close to Jamey, and professionally and personally, and I didn't see these things. And I don't know how that's possible. I don't know how we got here.
So we talked to Matt Owen, but we also wanted to make sure we talked to the, you know, low, mid-level, and even some of the other management in New Chapel. And so these women here, Crystal Blevins and Jordan Boulard, are 2 of the 3 paramedics currently on staff at New Chapel. And they painted it as a department that has a lot of rookies, has a lot of young people. It's their first job in EMS. And Crystal said she really hopes that these people who may have had a bad experience, that they don't leave the field.
Seeing them be failed by Jamey, by New Chapel, you just hope that they land somewhere that's going to grow them and at a service that they thrive at.
They're both looking for jobs at this point.
They are. New Chapel encouraged them to look for alternate employment. I would say, I think early August, maybe the first week of August, encouraged people to look for new jobs. And New Chapel is planning to stop 911 service on September 1st. So yes, they are looking for new jobs. They're confident they're going to be able to find them, but they do say they're going to have to take a pay cut because they said New Chapel paid above average.
And they're hoping that there's not that stigma that is attached to it, and they said they will forever have New Chapel on their resumes, and I know one of them told you they were quite concerned at how that'll look for people when they are going through that job process. So we've got this guilty plea from Jamey Noel, came at the same time in the last week as 2 more arrests in this investigation.
Yeah, on August 23rd, Jamey, entered that he was going to change his plea. And then a few hours later, we had arrests of John L. Miller III and Brittany Faree. So who are these people? John Miller is a current Clarksville police officer. Well, I should say current as of August 29th when we're recording this. And he's also a member of the Clark County Council. And he is charged with voting on contracts that, of Jamey's businesses while he was a friend with him. What you're looking at right here is a photo of them going to Cuba together in 2023. Jamey paid for that Cuba trip, partially paid for it using Utica Township Volunteer Firefighters Association funds. Miller also said that he would get roughly 20 to 25 meals annually paid for by Jamey Noel. And so Miller I think it's a level 6 felony, the lowest level. It's just conflict of interest is what it's called. But yeah, his case is just now starting. He pleaded not guilty in his first appearance.
And they took a warrant out for his phone. I remember just the last couple of days. You said they were searching his car.
That was the only thing that they mentioned in his initial hearing, that he potentially hadn't been 100% cooperative, is they asked him, where's your phone? And he wouldn't tell them where it was. So they did have to issue a search warrant for his phone and his car.
Okay. And then the second arrest with Brittany Faree.
Yeah, Brittany Faree, the second arrest. Brittany Faree was a Clark County counselor from 2019 to 2022. She has a 4-year-old child with Jamey Noel. And Jamey Noel has paid over $100,000 in child support to Faree out of the Volunteer Firefighters Association fund. But she's not charged with anything related to that. She's charged with the same thing that Miller is charged with, conflict of interest, because she voted to give New Chapel EMS funding twice. And Indiana State Police say they reached out to the attorney for the Clark County Council and asked, did either of these people fill out a conflict of interest form before these votes? And the attorney said, to my knowledge, no, they did not. So if they had recused themselves from the vote, they probably would be okay. But the basis of the charge is that they didn't do that.
So this is all very fluid and going on right now. So as far as where we go from here, we have this plea agreement from Jamey Noel, but again, the judge has to sign off and still wants to hear from more victims. Yes.
State Prosecutor Rick Hurdle said, in his opinion, a 15-year prison sentence was on the high end of what they could, get for Jamey's crimes. He's not charged with anything on its own that has a max sentence of above 6 years, but you could stack them, consecutively after each other. But Rick Hurdle said, I think 15 years was on the high end. But as we said at the start of this, Judge Medlock, when he saw the plea agreement for the first time, he said, I want to hear from the people before I accept this. So we're expecting Jamey to have a sentencing hearing, I would say sometime in mid to late September. And at that sentencing hearing, people who were affected by these alleged crimes, and I say alleged because if he denies the plea agreement, we could have a trial again.
Right.
But they want to hear from those people at the sentencing hearing, and then he'll decide if he's going to accept the plea deal or not.
And then as far as Casey and Misty's cases trying to be joined, we mentioned at the top of the show that Casey's only charged with level 6 felonies, which calls for a 6-person jury in Indiana. Misty with level 5 and 6. So that would call for a 12-person jury unless they can agree to some solution there and combine those.
Yeah, so they essentially would have, Misty essentially would have to agree to a 6-person jury. And their deadline where they have to decide on that is September 5th. So we'll have an answer by then. about if their cases will be joined or if they'll have 2 separate trials.
All right, a lot going on in Southern Indiana. Travis, we know that you are keeping a close eye on this, and we appreciate you for all of your insight. And thanks to everyone at home for watching this special presentation. We'll see you next time.